Today I'm going to be talking about my entire experience in the GATE program. So I have never done this all in one video, but now since I've started YouTube, I can do a little bit longer form content. And so in the past, if you've looked at like my Instagram videos, I have a lot of videos sharing like one activity that we did at a time or one little bit about GATE. So I want this to be a little bit more all-inclusive. And so to start off with, I want to talk about like the setup to my GATE program, and then I'll get into the activities a little bit more. So to start off with, I was in GATE program starting in first grade, and there was like the Iowa basic skills tests, and of course you did the headphone testing and you did some of the tanagrams and whatnot. I did all of that. The one thing I don't really have memories of is the pink drink. I believe I maybe did it once or twice, but I also wonder if that's just like a collective implanted memory. Like everybody talks about it, so like I feel like I remember it. I know for sure I did like the hearing tests. And I know that I scored very high on the Iowa basic skills tests, and I've laid out in past posts how the personality assessment type or personality assessment system, the CIA uses, like they have a whole document on that. I laid out how that ties into this Iowa basic skills testing. So that's what we used, as far as I know, for testing for the GATE program in my school. The first year or 2 years, I'm not exactly sure, at least 2 semesters, we were in a room at my normal school. And that was probably just for one class, like maybe for reading, or maybe for English or whatever. The first semester we learned about giraffes, I believe, and then the next semester we learned about castles, or vice versa. I know that we learned about those 2 things at my school in a separate classroom from the normal kid, or like the other kids, all of the gifted kids, and it was, I would guess it was probably 8 to 10 of us. That would be my estimate, and maybe it went down over the years. I'm not exactly sure, because the setup did change, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. I do want to note though that castles are something that are used a lot in programming. A lot of you mentioned like a mind mansion. I personally, I've heard that term a couple of times, and I haven't looked into it too much, but so if that rings a bell for you, maybe look into this a little bit more. When I was deprogramming myself and working through my internal Kabbalah tree, I found a castle, and that held a lot of very important programming. And that's something that's talked about in a lot of the books that I've read, or, you know, a lot of the resources that I have looked into in programming. They talk about a castle being somewhere built within, you know, within your mind. So that's very notable, very important. I especially remember talking about like the moat and all of the defense systems of the castle. After that, again, I don't know if we were in there, if it was like for a semester, or at what point exactly we switched to this second method, but at some point in time, all of these kids who were continuing in, we called it TAG. I refer to GATE because that's more of like the official government name, but in my school it was called TAG, Talented and Gifted. So in TAG, what we did was, you know, for I want to say 1 or 2 afternoons per week, we would get on a bus and go downtown. So it was probably a 10 or 15 minute drive for us. And then we would go to a school that was used for like an alternative learning school. And you would, you know, enter in, and there was like a sunken, gymnasium area, and I think that we were on the same floor as that, if I remember right. We had to go down a stairwell and then turn a corner and then like kind of turn again, and then we were tucked way kind of under the stairs. And I want to say that there was no windows. However, there could have been one small window, but that was blocked off to make it a little bit dimmer. And when we were there, I really enjoyed my time in TAG. Like I looked forward to it every week. I also really liked school in general. However, I really looked forward to TAG because it wasn't boring to me, whereas some of the other classes were boring. So, well, when I say these things, like, don't think that I didn't enjoy it, or like that it didn't benefit me in any way. It definitely did. However, I just know a lot about the MK Ultra mind control programs, and I know a lot about how programming works, and I know that the things that they did are really similar to programming or prepping our brains to be programmed. So some of the things that I remember, first of all, playing video games is something a lot of people mention, and I do remember playing some video games. I specifically remember some like war or like shooting game, and I remember, oh, what's the one where you're like, the Oregon Trail, that's not the one where you like die from dysentery. I always died because I don't eat meat. I've never really eaten meat. And I never fed my character meat because I assumed they didn't need it, and then they would always die from like lack of nutrition. So I always remember that. I remember learning about the different like states of your brain or like consciousness, you know, the dream states, alpha, and like theta and delta and whatnot. So all the different like states of consciousness and brain waves, talking about, you know, what's best for learning versus what's best for like programming, or like what's your dreaming state, and also like REM sleep cycles, which is interesting because that's all information like getting into like a 4 to 8 hertz frequency that can help with like programming your mind. I use that a lot. If I'm doing reprogramming, then I'll use like a 4 to 8 hertz, and it's much more effective. So I'm sure that they used things like that as well, and just giving us that information, like, you know, we know that, and we're kind of conscious of what, or we're consenting rather to what they're doing to us when they do it. And another thing that I remember learning is all about the different types of like the types of learning, so like kinesthetic or like hands-on or like auditory or visual, like how do you learn best, and I think that might have played into like how they were programming us, because there's different ways that you can do programming, or reprogramming for that matter. Like, you know, there's different ways to like do, you know, get repetitive thoughts into you. Like, do you need to see the same thing over and over again, or hear the same thing over and over again, that type of thing. So I think that they were making some type of profile on us in that sense. And then there were a couple of other notable activities. So first of all, we did a lot of like logic puzzles where it's like you were given a set of like people, and then their favorite restaurant, their favorite color, and the job they work. And you had to match all of those things together based on these clues that they gave you. And I really enjoyed those. Like, I will still do those for fun, like to this day. But that's, you know, they're just kind of training you to think a certain way and, you know, see if you're useful. And so from there, they, man, there's a lot that they did, like, now that I think about it, that was like all just kind of linking to whether or not we were useful to them, and like building a whole profile on us. So like there was one thing that they did to see if we could communicate telepathically, is what my thought is. And so that would be like giving us a problem to solve without talking. I think that for us, it was building a tower out of like marshmallows and toothpicks. And then they also gave us something to like a worksheet or whatever, where we had to like read through, and we read the scenario that we were stranded on a desert island, gave a little descriptor of the desert island, and then we had a list of things that we could choose from, and we had to like say what we picked and why we picked it. And so I think that they were kind of profiling like how your brain thought in that sense. And it all kind of makes sense, because what it seems like they were doing is seeking out kids who were going to be talented astral projectors or remote viewers, as well as other psychic abilities. However, these are the ones that I have the most documentation on, is astral projection and remote viewing. And that's because we also know that so a lot of people report a lot of like hypnosis or meditation type things, and which I totally remember myself, a lot of like heads up, 7-Up, different just things to like get you into a relaxed state. They talked about like the brain hemispheres as well. And so they used something called the Monroe Gateway tapes, which uses hemisync technology. So to get your brain waves to function like kind of at, more together, the two hemispheres. And that is to get you into a mind state where you can astral project. And so it walks you through a series of meditations to do this. And it teaches kids how to do this and just how to enter these different states of consciousness. So part of the project is it is programming people. So it is using the profile that they built and your ability to meet them into an astral realm. So that might look like taking you into a school in a dream or to or an abduction, and then they'll implant information into your brain, using that profile and like what they know about you, and how they know to program you. And so from there, they also, they would teach people how to remote view and to, determine whether or not you're useful to them in that sense. But a lot of us, they also used for like the alien abduction program, like the alien breeding program, experimenting on us. And also for fighting like a astral or space war. If you think about like Star Wars, for example, a lot of people report getting like pulled out of their bodies, and then into somebody else's body. So that's kind of a crazy experience. So lots of things there that it like just led to. And so, yeah, that is my experience. Let me know what your guys' is.